Thanks, Brian, and everybody out there in Manchester Land and Auburn and Hooksett. This is the progress report. By God, it's the last day of February.
It is.
February
Short month.
28th, and there's a hell of a big, bright moon out there today, which is not necessarily a good thing, because in 2 days we're going to have a lot of heavy weather coming our way,
So I've heard.
it looks like it's climate change is just a fraud. I mean, nobody believes in it, but we're going to, I think, Boston and maybe the New Hampshire coast going to be hit very hard with more flooding.
Strawberry Bank was just
Strawberry
reviewing what they've done to protect that area. It's on landfill out near the river and low-lying area. Cities all over the country. And our military, ship ports down in Newport News, Virginia. They're raising their docks.
The military believes in it. The insurance industry believes in it. Some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't believe in it, but we think
we were going to talk about that.
We got to get going. We are really pleased here that on this last day of February of 2018, we have one of our candidates for first congressional district, Chris Pappas, who served the city, the state, the county, in many capacities, and
held his first elected office at the age of 7.
Really?
Something like that. I think it was 22, but it's pretty close.
But in any event, Mr. Farley, we've gotten used to having the POTUS report. You got something tonight?
I don't have. I'm not as well prepared as I would like to be, but I would like to follow up a little bit on the topic that I really vented on last week, and that's the topic of common sense gun policy. I want to harken back to compare the Second Amendment to the First Amendment. First Amendment gives us the right of free speech, but we all know that you can't just say anything you want. The great example from the Supreme Court is you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. You have free speech, but that is just beyond the line of what free speech is. So we have precedent for regulating our rights to meet certain circumstances. And interestingly enough, in the Second Amendment itself, it talks about a well-regulated, the word regulated is right in there, talking about a well-regulated militia. And we know that the personal right to bear arms was discovered by the Supreme Court only recently. It's not something that's been around in this country for 200 years.
Justice Scalia and the Heller decision.
But perhaps the hearts and minds of Americans are changing. We see a few examples here in the business community. We've heard many announcements of companies who are severing their ties with the NRA. In particular, I'd like to point out that these are discounts, type of thing where someone who's an NRA member would get a benefit. Among those companies are Delta Airlines, a major airline, which was offering discount flights to NRA members. Another one that came out today, which I think was very, very important, was Dick's Sporting Goods, which is a nationwide sporting goods chain. And it's not only the Dick's brand, they have several other brands of their sporting goods retail outlets. They've decided that they are no longer going to sell the civilian version of the assault rifle, if you want to call it that. I don't want to get into the quagmire of defining what assault rifles are and what they aren't and what can be modified. That's just baloney that's used to send up a smokescreen. But the point being that businesses are making a calculation that their future looks brighter if they distance themselves from the gun culture here in America. And that, I think, is a very important step that the country has to take, and at some point there will be a tipping point. Now, there's been a lot of backlash. In particular, I believe it's the Lieutenant Governor of Georgia has threatened Delta Airlines. Apparently there was a large package of tax changes that were going to benefit Delta Airlines that was in the works in the legislature, and they're threatening to put the kibosh.
They're huge in Georgia because they're major.
Well, that's their hub. That's their hub.
There's the Atlanta airport, which is one of probably the busiest airport in the world.
So, but in response, I understand about a half dozen mayors of other large cities have offered to make their airports available for Delta if they would like to move their operations. So there's movement, I think, is the important thing, and I just wanted to bring that up. Another point that I do have to make, though, FedEx is going in the other direction. They've decided to publicly announce that they're staying with the NRA. They're going to continue to offer the kind of discount services that they have been. And I understand, just from news reporting, that they've adopted a policy that they want to be the transport company for weapons. They want to kind of corner the market in weapons
Okay, well, I got
transport
an answer
in the
for
United
that.
States.
UPS.
Well, I got to tell you, I do a lot of online shopping, and that's going to factor in. If I have a choice, I'm going to pick UPS because, as you know, I'm in favor of gun regulation, and I'm going to make that choice. You know, a lot of people are saying that they're going to boycott businesses and stores that are adopting this non-support of the NRA, and I say that I feel safer in those stores. I'm fine with that. I don't have to worry that the guy standing next to me might have had a bad day and also be packing heat. I don't have to worry about that now.
Very good.
So I think things are improving, and it's not really a POTUS report, but it's kind of peripheral to what's going on with the president. We do see, though, the president did have a meeting and to discuss going forward legislation, and very interestingly, he's kind of funny the way he does things. He told some senators that you know, the assault weapons ban, they were afraid of the NRA. And then there was another provision. I wish I had written it down, but there was a provision. He said, "Put that in. I might support it." Well, how the heck can you? How can you build legislation when the president says, "I might support it, but I want to see it in there"? It just makes things difficult. But not a very focused POTUS report on the progress report. I'll do better next time I'm out here. But for now, that's where we stand. There's some movement in the gun in the gun regulation
Well,
issue.
I would say that of all the disastrous mass killings we've had, and the worst, I think, probably was maybe Sandy Hook with those little kids and their teachers being gunned down in that Connecticut town, and nothing happened. But this time, I think things are happening, and I got to credit those kids from the Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School down in Parkland. Those kids that got out there, and it's pretty tough to denigrate them as tools.
It was easy to denigrate the parents of those dead kindergartners.
Yeah, it seemed to be, but
It's not as easy to denigrate these young. I'm in love with them. They're brilliant. They're beautiful.
For the
and they're
first
doing a
time, I
great job.
really feel the ground is shifting a little bit here. It's entirely new, but I do think it's happening. But I want to get to
Let's
introduce
get
our
on to bigger
guest.
and better things.
Our guest is
Let's get to the meat of the show.
Our guest is somebody we're very glad to have representing us here in the city of Manchester and surrounding towns as an executive counselor, a very accomplished person with a lot of incredible achievements in his. You're pretty young, Chris. I mean, I look over you. Oh boy, if I'd done everything you'd done when I was your age, I'd feel really good about myself.
We're all aging at the same rate, though, so we're all going in the same direction.
Is that true? I'm gonna hang on to that thought.
Yeah, you'll find out as you grow older, it begins to speed up.
Okay,
So
all right.
that's a district. Chris is a graduate of Harvard College, and he's run marathons. He's been on Do You Want to Be a Millionaire and had a good achievement there. He's the fourth generation to be owner manager of one of the great establishments in Manchester, and indeed for all of New Hampshire, the Puritan Restaurant. We have restaurant after restaurant, but everybody likes to go to the Puritan, where you get a great meal at a great value, and it's a great place to meet and greet.
You see everybody in the city at one point.
You see everybody in the city. New York, say go to Times Square, you'll see everybody. In Manchester, or even in New Hampshire as a whole, go to the Puritan, you'll see everybody you want. And he's been a. Were you ever a state rep? You were, weren't you?
I was for 2 terms.
2 terms
Yeah.
as state rep, city chair for the Democrats, Hillsborough County treasurer, and then he's been an executive. How many terms? This is second?
3rd term.
Third term as
Yep.
executive counselor, a job with major responsibilities, since we have a very important government role for our executive council, unlike any other state. I think we're only 2 states with executive councils. The only one that really has some real chops, some real meat.
And there have been a lot of issues in the past 3 terms on this that have come to the Executive Council here, and they're very challenging issues, and your vote's been an important one.
It's very important. So this is a person of considerable accomplishments, and he has decided to throw his hat in the ring to be one of what is now 8 candidates. Is that right?
I think it's 8.
8
Yep.
candidates seeking to be the Democratic nominee for the 1st Congressional District. Our wonderful Congresswoman, Carol Shea Porter, has announced she's not seeking re-election. Probably everybody who's interested in politics knows that. And that created an open seat. And Chris
Reminds me-
Pappas has decided that he would like to succeed Carol Shea Porter and represent the cities of Manchester, Laconia, the Seacoast. I don't know what the rest of the district is. Burnley is in the 1st district too, isn't it?
No, that's in the 2nd district.
That's in the
but
2nd district.
North Conway, Carroll
North
County.
Conway,
Goes
Carroll
up
County.
about that far.
Mostly the eastern part of the state, except when you get way up there in Coas County, is in the 1st district. And this is a more challenging district for a Democratic candidate. The voter registration is much more favorable for candidates in the 2nd congressional district, which is kind of interesting, because I was going to get to this, Chris, and I don't want to keep talking, but I want to just one more thing. We have a candidate who lives in the 2nd district.
Yeah.
His name is Levy Sanders. He's Bernie Sanders' son. A lot of people are very passionate about Bernie. He wants to seek the office in the 1st district where he doesn't live. Well, that tells you, the chances are better for a Democrat in the 2nd district, but in the 2nd district we have a very capable congressperson, and Annie Kuster, who's going to seek re-election, and she's not going to be challenged, so he's decided to seek the 1st district.
It's a major rule of politics, Bob. If you see daylight, go for it. And with that open seat, that's daylight, and people are going for it from
Yeah.
far and wide. It's exciting.
Yeah.
I think of the field of candidates that we have, it's a good, strong field. And as a Democrat,
It's a strong field.
That's encouraging.
Well,
It is.
not to butt in here,
Oh.
but but if you're ready for me, no, it's an interesting phenomenon because back in the 80s and 90s, you would have to beg a Democrat to run for federal office in New Hampshire, and now we have a primary like we've never seen before in terms of the number of candidates, and I think it's going to be a constructive discussion, and I think it's a healthy thing for the party. And I think that if I'm lucky enough to be the nominee, I'll be a stronger candidate because of having gone through that process. So
Well, there you go.
I'm of the mindset, the more the merrier. And I look forward to the discussion that we're having. We're moving around the state quite a bit. We're having discussions in people's living rooms, and we'll be doing candidate forums and debates eventually, so you'll get to see us standing next to one another. But I'm happy to stack my record up to anyone else who's running today, and look forward to engaging with them on the issues.
Yeah.
This is an important contest at an important point in time for our country. And I, for one, just couldn't be on the sidelines during this process.
Well, and you're certainly not. And I have to say, I think I shouldn't get ahead of ourselves here, because who knows what things are going to look like in the second half of this year. But right now, it looks like the more important thing may be getting the nomination. I mean, we've had special election after special election. We had one yesterday in Laconia, and again we elected a Democrat. We've had 9 of 11 seats
That's right.
have flipped because of Democratic candidates running for the New Hampshire House.
I think what these special elections show, number one, there's a lot of energy in the progressive side of the Democratic Party. People that want to volunteer, want to contribute, want to knock on doors. They're looking for an avenue to get involved and to try to change the dynamics out there right now. So we're angry with what we see on cable news every night, but it doesn't end there. We've got to get out and try to do something to see positive change in our community. And so people are wanting to do that. I think the second interesting fact from these special elections is that we've been fielding candidates who tend to be new to political office. They're community-minded people. They're well-rooted in the communities that they've been elected to represent. So I think of Edie Damaris in Wolfboro, or
Right.
Phil up in Laconia, who started a recovery center in the community, or Carrie Lerner, who's done some
down
great
in
work in her
Chester,
neck of the
Atkinson,
woods.
yeah.
So these are people who are able to get elected in tough districts where a Democrat usually doesn't win. And so for me, that's the lesson that I take away from this. And I think it's something that, we talk a lot about in my campaign. I mean, I have lifelong New Hampshire roots. I was born and raised here in Manchester. I run a restaurant business that's been around for 101 years. I think people are looking for candidates who are grounded in the state, know the issues. aren't necessarily just coming in and learning things on the fly. I've got longstanding relationships and a longstanding appreciation for what makes New Hampshire work and what makes us special.
So
Yeah.
the first phone call isn't, can I have your vote? That's the fifth phone call. They've already, you
Yeah.
already know them. The people already know you from the work you've already done in the community,
Yeah.
from putting the bike racks out in front of your restaurant, helping Manchester grow in that way. All of those little things that you do to make the city better.
Yeah,
And
so
the
I
community.
think that track record matters a lot in politics these days. And I think as chaotic and as frustrating as our national federal system is right now, I think people are looking local and they want to know what issues are you going to work on that are going to impact them and their families very directly.
Yeah.
As I move around the state, surprisingly, Trump's not the first thing out of people's mouths.
Really?
It's the opioid crisis. It's veterans' health care. It's affordable housing. There are a number of issues that people see in their community and they want them addressed. And I think as a member of Congress, as frustrating as the political system is, I think you can still add a lot of value in understanding the state that you represent, understanding the contours of New Hampshire, and leaning into those local issues and providing solutions. And so I can talk about those in terms of the track record of the issues that I've worked on at the State House. And that's where I think I can make the most difference for people's lives as a member of Congress, understanding the district, doing the best constituent service I can, and then trying to leverage resources from Washington to invest in those efforts and invest in the strategies that we need to see succeed right here.
Well, I guess you partly answered the question that I was going to ask you, which is, you're now in your third term as an executive council. You've dealt with a lot of serious state issues. A lot of people were thinking you might be interested in running to be the next governor of New Hampshire, but instead you've decided to try to get to represent us in Congress, which seems like it's a pretty dysfunctional place these days. How come?
It is dysfunctional. And you'll hear people on both sides of the aisle say that Washington is broken. And they're absolutely right when they say it. And I think we have a crisis in our democracy right now where big money reigns, where the voices of regular folks are drowned out by the money and special interests that have way too much power in Washington. You look at the tax legislation that was a big giveaway to corporations and the wealthiest Americans at the expense of the rest of us, at the expense of our ability to invest in the future of this country and shore up Social Security and Medicare and the social safety net. So the priorities are out of balance. And I think that I don't want to believe that this is as good as it gets. I talked to so many folks as I was considering running who said, stick with your position, focus on what you're doing with your business and just have a good life. Washington's beyond repair. And I can't believe that this is it. We've got one democracy, we've got one Congress, we've got to make this work.
Yeah,
and we've got to make it
we
work
do.
to the benefit of everyone who
Absolutely.
lives in this country, regardless of their political persuasion.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people are hungry for, creating a space where we can relate to one another and have a dialogue and move the ball forward on the critical issues. And that's what I hope to be able to do. I'm someone who has core convictions. I believe that health care should be a right and not a privilege. And I want to take steps to ensure that everyone's covered. I believe that this scourge of gun violence is beyond us, and we should be, not seeing in action when we see these crises happen and we see lives of students being lost at schools.
Yeah.
We've got to do something about it. And you know what? 95% of the public supports universal background checks.
Right.
That's a great place to
And
start.
it's both parties and all
And it's across the
demographics.
board. It's gun owners and non-gun owners
Yeah,
alike.
yeah.
So we've got to shake up the system. And I think we've got to get back to the roots of how can we look at issues and build solutions in a consensus-minded way and try to get things to happen again. So, I want to think big on a lot of issues. But look, at the end of the day, if it takes incremental steps to achieve progress, I'm willing to do that too.
Okay, great.
Well, we've teed up a lot of fruit for discussion.
We
Yeah.
hope,
But we're at our first break.
And we will be at our first break. Please call us if you would like to
Oh, yeah,
participate.
great opportunity, folks.
640-3091. We're very pleased to have with us Chris Pappas, currently serving his third term as executive counselor, but launching an effort to become our next congressman representing New Hampshire's 1st District, which includes, of course, Manchester and some of the towns surrounding us. So please call in. We'll be right back. Hello again. This is the progress report for the last day of February, 2018. By God, and it was really a nice day. I had a nice walk on the rail trail today, and
Yeah.
If you thought February was good, just wait for March.
well, that's when you have your fabulous parade for the Hibernians, right?
We've got a few things planned.
Yeah, you do. Our greatest parade is coming up. What's the date?
It's going to be the 25th of March.
And we will have
Sunday
a
the 25th.
And we will definitely have a program about that
On the
because my
14th.
good friend
Yeah.
Mike is the head of the Hibernians, and they do this parade.
I got to make clear, the parade is done by the St. Patrick's Parade Committee. It is a separate committee of volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are Hibernians, and the Hibernians certainly support the parade, and the parade comes out of the Hibernians.
Okay.
But I cannot take credit for the parade because it's actually that wonderful committee of hardworking people that put that parade on.
Now, the Grand Marshal this year, should put in a plug, is an employee of
It
ours
sure
at the
is.
back room, a
Please do.
longtime worker and a educator in Manchester, Sheila Smith.
Oh, really?
Is part of the O'Neill family and has the biggest heart of anyone you'll meet.
And she will
she's
be
always-
nice.
She
Yeah,
will
she's
be
done
on
a
the
lot
show
of good work in the community.
on the
All
14th.
right. I
And
always
she's
look
a very
forward to that
worthy,
parade.
a very worthy Grand Marshal indeed. And as I've said before, and we'll be talking about it, I don't want to take too much time, but the position of Grand Marshal is just slightly more important than the Bishop of the Diocese of Manchester. It's a very important position here in Manchester. Only a little bit more important.
I hope the bishop's not watching.
He'll be good with it. He's cool.
But back to more serious business. We digress a little bit here.
So let's talk about the fact is you've decided to try and step up and gain federal office. This will be the first time you've done that, but and there's lots of competition out there. So let's talk about some of the issues that you've dealt with, both at the state and federal level. The state level, of course, you get all kinds of issues coming before you as one of the 5 members of our executive council. One that Mike just mentioned is rail. I mean, are we getting any closer to getting commuter rail to Manchester, in your opinion?
That great engine of growth and development that Southern New Hampshire needs so
Something I
bad.
feel so strongly about that we absolutely need. But go ahead, tell us
It would
about
be a game changer for the city, and it's something that has got to happen, I think. I think Manchester is leaving a lot on the table in terms of economic development potential, in terms of recruitment of young talent to our region. So I believe in that project. I've been fighting for it for a number of years now, and we can take the next important step if the legislature just puts the federal money in the 10-year plan that's available to do the engineering work, do the financial planning and environmental work, take that next step. And, the council passed it. The governor said he was for it. He put it in his Amazon proposal. It's nice to hear that he changed his position on it. It
I
was
was
good enough
very
for
excited
Amazon.
about
It
that.
should be good enough for the rest of us and the businesses that we currently have. But it's an important tool, I think, for our economy and for our transportation infrastructure. So within the next couple weeks, the House is going to vote on that, and there will be an amendment. And I just hope that there are enough people on both sides of the aisle to push that forward. Shouldn't be a political issue.
Should be
and
bipartisan.
it's not even a regional issue. It's something that benefits the entire state.
Absolutely.
I could never understand the ideological objection to it. I've tried to listen. I've
Yeah.
tried to glean what the real issue is. I don't understand it. I'm not going to ask you to present that argument, but I just cannot understand how ideologically a railroad is a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, the argument it would cost some money, and maybe the state would have to pony up a little money, but there are costs and there are investments.
Yeah.
This would be an investment that I think would return
Yeah.
hugely to the benefit of us. I've been told many times, and I have to believe it may be true, that Manchester, New Hampshire is the largest urban area in the country without any access to any passenger rail of any kind. I recently took a train trip out to the Midwest and got off in Toledo, because that's where the train that I was on stopped, and I wanted to go to Detroit. So they took us by bus to Detroit, and I said, well, maybe Detroit's the one. But no, they have Amtrak in Detroit. It goes to Chicago and a couple of other places. So,
Just not Toledo. Huh?
not Toledo. Yeah.
But you know what? This next step would take advantage of some federal money that's there and it would allow us to put together the plan, to see exactly what it would cost and where the revenue could come from.
Yeah.
Is it parking fees? How much can we count on in terms of the federal appropriation for this?
Yeah.
Those sources are there, and let's put it together
What's
and
the upgrade
ultimately
cost
see if
gonna
it makes
be?
sense.
I mean, we're going to have to upgrade the rails. What's the
That's
cost
right.
going to be? We're going to have to build stations. It's the
And-
it's the reality of it,
Yeah.
not just the concept.
And those upgrades would help us not just with passenger, but with freight. We would have, anyway, that's enough of that. Another subject I'd like to see you weigh in on, which is not so directly related to the Executive Council, but it's a very important issue, preserving our Medicaid expansion to help us deal with a lot of issues, including the opioid crisis.
It's an essential step the state has to take. I've been around quite a bit in terms of visiting with treatment providers and visiting recovery centers around the district. They know this is the number one tool that they have in this fight to make sure that people are covered, that they can access services. This has helped New Hampshire, build these things out. We're still in a real precarious situation right now, and you heard with hope that 5 centers, recovery centers, might be closing. We're actually doing some work at the state level to try to get them a contract at our next meeting to make sure that they can get some additional funding so they won't have to close these centers. And
as much as that's a good thing,
Yeah.
I wonder why the discussion didn't take place 6 months ago as opposed to after the crisis.
Yeah.
Why can't we see these crises
Yeah.
coming?
Well, it has been an ongoing discussion, and unfortunately, the resources just haven't shaken loose from the state level, and we need more from
And
the
what
fed-
does that mean? The resources haven't shaken loose from the state level. That means that the state of New Hampshire is not raising the revenue it needs to provide the services
Yeah.
needed by it. Is that right?
Well, and we're in this crisis, if you want to really back up. We're in this crisis, and we've been hit hard by it, harder than most any other state in the country, because we did not invest in mental health. We did not invest in substance abuse treatment over a period of decades. And so when the cheap drugs hit the streets here in Manchester and across the state, we weren't able to cope with it. People couldn't access services. And so we're seeing a death rate that's second highest in the country, second to West Virginia. And the formulas that distribute the federal aid don't reflect the fact that while we're a small state with a small population, we're seeing this at a magnitude
per
worse than
capita
other
is much
states per
worse, yeah.
capita. So we've got to make sure those formulas reflect that. Our delegation's been fighting hard for additional dollars. But look, these organizations, which are formed out of the goodness of people's hearts, with a lot of sweat equity from people from the community level, building these off the ground.
Private loans from directors? I mean, these people are doing everything they can.
They can't make it on bake sales alone. They need some real money to be put behind these efforts, and this isn't something that is just going to be a year or two worth of a commitment. This has to be a long-term commitment for our state, because it's not just heroin anymore. It's fentanyl, it's carfentanil. We're now seeing a real spike in terms of crystal meth on the streets in New Hampshire.
back, huh?
So it's one thing after another. We don't invest enough in alcohol abuse treatment and prevention in this state. There should be additional money that's appropriated to fund that based on the liquor sales that we have. So we really don't do a good job at the state level in terms of those investments. We need more from the federal government. There are lots of great initiatives that are working. We need a little bit of everything, and we need to make sure that that money's put behind it.
Can I just briefly just touch on the point you make? We need
Yeah.
more from the federal government. A lot of times, as Democrats, we get criticized for, throwing money at everything. It's all about money, and it's all money giveaways. But the fact of the matter is that the people of New Hampshire pay federal taxes. And for every dollar we give into Washington, we're not getting a dollar back for our investment. And we're a state with a very particular, very specific need that's identifiable. And all that we're asking for, you in particular, and by saying we need more
Yeah.
federal money, is to get what's ours, what we've put into
Yeah.
the system, back to help our people here.
Yeah. No, we have all gone
We're not
to...
looking for a handout here.
That's right. We've all gone to funerals. I mean, I don't go to an event where I don't have someone coming up to me saying the name of a loved one that they lost. And it's real tragic. I try to hold those close to my heart and try to keep motivated by the stories that I hear around the state of New Hampshire. So we've got to turn the corner here, but it's going to take a huge effort over a sustained period of time in order for us to be able to
Can we do it on our own here in New Hampshire, or do we need the federal government to help us?
No, I think we do need the federal resources. We absolutely do. In terms of the way we've been funding things, over the last couple decades, we need those federal resources to be able to make it work.
Yeah. It's just shocking to me that here we have in in Manchester. You have to credit this city, and particularly our fire department, Chris Hickey, for putting this safe station program in place.
Yep.
It's a model for other cities in the state and around the country, and it's successful. And yet, all they do is take these people in, get their vital signs, stabilize them, and then have to put them someplace where they can get help. And those places seem to be in crisis and disappearing.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that we have to have the Medicaid expansion to have the resources we need when they've gone through Safe Station to get to the next step where they can actually get on the way to recovery.
Absolutely. There are 50,000 folks that are insured and covered through Medicaid expansion. A large proportion of those are accessing these services. So it's important that this proposal gets reauthorized. And we should make it permanent, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
We should have a long-standing plan in place so it's not up to the whims of who controls the legislature at one point in time. This is just important to the overall system. I'm of the mindset that we're all in this together, and as a community, we rise or fall together. And I think that we've got to take care of folks out there, because if we don't, there are implications in terms of our workforce, in terms of crime, in terms of what it does to our law enforcement. So we got to make sure that we, provide these monies, make that investment, take care of our friends and neighbors, because it's better for all of us in the end.
Exactly. So here's another subject that's very contemporary, very much in the news, and that is the what I would call the voucher program. The people in this I call freedom of choice program. I think this has a pretty severe implications for our public school system here in Manchester. You're a product of our public school system here in Manchester, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Central High School graduate.
How about that? Damn good.
Got a great education here.
Got a great
Manchester
education in our
schools.
public schools here. So what do you think about that? I mean, what do you think about this attempt to divert resources to give people so-called school choice to send their kids to other schools, even including religious schools?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think there are constitutional issues with the legislation, but I also feel that it's part of a really extreme agenda that's designed to undermine public education in our state and pull money out of the public school system and divert it to private religious schools and home schools. And I don't think that's where those public dollars should be going, frankly.
Yep.
I think that we should work on the issues that exist within the public school system, but we're not going to be able to succeed if we're pulling money away. So we know the issues we're facing in Manchester. I think we've got folks in place in the mayor's office and on the boards that understand that we need to take strides with local education here. We're not going to be able to succeed if we're pulling money out of the system and diverting it other places.
Yeah, okay, very good. These are issues that, to one degree or another, you've had to deal with as a state official, an elected state official, in a very important and significant position, being one of 5 executive counselors. What are the issues that mostly are of concern to you if you succeed, as I hope you do, in becoming our congressman? What are the federal issues that you're mostly interested in pursuing?
Sure. Well, I look at the leadership that Carol Shea Porter has offered, and I appreciate what she's done because she's the same person today as she was when she first ran back in 2006. And I think that says a lot about her character, about her independence. And so I think we need someone who's going to pick up where she leaves off. We need someone who's going to be a champion for middle-class issues, who's going to appreciate fully that there's an opportunity gap that exists, that we've got to make sure that we work to expand middle-class opportunity, raise wages, and ensure that families have the resources they need to make it in this economy. And they don't necessarily have all the tools right now. We can do a better job at making sure our government is in tune with what people's needs are out there. So I think that's first and foremost. I think there are some dangerous proposals out there with respect to health care that would strip health care away from tens of millions of Americans.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to fight that tooth and nail. As I mentioned, I want to look for ways to expand health care to cover more people. And whether that's adding a public option to the exchange or expanding the Medicare program so that those 50 and older can buy in, we need to look for ways to enhance what we have. But we've got to make sure we make it more affordable, reduce the cost of prescription drugs, and push back against these attempts by the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress to take away what we have and disrupt the marketplace.
They're doing it by death by 1,000 cuts. They couldn't get an outright repeal, so they're chipping away at it every way that they can. I think it's a very, very unfortunate
You're exactly
development.
right. And I think what we see with this administration, there's a pattern there. And the pattern is to put folks in charge of agencies and at the highest level of this administration.
Who don't believe in the mission of the agency they serve.
That's right. That's right.
Yep.
Who don't believe in the mission, and who represent very self-serving special interests, whether it's at the EPA, where the big polluters and fossil fuel industry has been put in charge, whether it's at Treasury or you name it. We have folks running this government who represent a very narrow perspective, and it's not one that the American people benefit from. So I think we need some oversight. I think we need a change in terms of the overall outlook. And I think this election is one way we can do that. We don't have a presidential race on the ballot this year. There's no Senate race.
We don't have any Senate races. That's
right.
True.
So this is our only federal race in this particular district. This is our opportunity to weigh in about how things are going in Washington. And I don't think they're going very well. And I want to try to focus on what we can get accomplished the next 2 years, certainly. And if there are ways we can work in a bipartisan fashion, I'll look for those ways. But I think we also have to say as a country that, we don't live in Donald Trump's America, that the United States that we know, that we see out in the streets of Manchester, is a lot better, a lot more decent, a lot more generous, a lot more civil than the type of politics that Donald Trump represents.
Yeah.
And I want to make that loud and clear in this particular campaign.
Good for you.
Chris, you mentioned something, you were talking about Carol Shea Porter's work, and then you were talking about the needs, and it just triggered something in my mind. We have a new report that the state of New Hampshire may be the only state that doesn't need its own VA hospital. And I'm just wondering if you could give us a brief comment on that. What's your thought on the situation going on with our VA hospital, and
Sure.
where should we be?
I think we should have a full-service VA hospital, and I think it's been the tradition of our delegation to try to fight for it. In the absence of it, we need to make sure that the Veterans Choice Program is permanent and that there are opportunities for veterans to access health care at the community level. So people aren't getting on a shuttle bus in Manchester to go to Jamaica Plain for something that they could receive right here in the community.
And I know several people that have had to do that, and it's not a good solution for them.
So I think some of the recommendations of the task force are positive and things that I can buy into, and I'd like to see further work done on them in terms of developing more community-based centers and more opportunities for our veterans to get care right where they live. Ultimately, I'd like to see more services and full services at Manchester, and that's something that I'd work for if I'm elected.
Good for you. One other thing, we're about up to our next break here, but one of the big issues is, I guess it's time for our next break. Folks, we will take our final break. This will be we'll be on our third segment after a very short break. And again, I urge anybody who's watching us that wants to participate, this is a good opportunity to talk to the man who may well be the next congressman. If he wins the primary, I predict he will be the next congressman. And you can participate by joining us by calling us at 640-3091, and we'd love to have you participate if you have an inclination to give us a call. We'll be right back. So this is the last segment for this show, the last Wednesday in February of 2018 on the Progress Report. And we are very, very pleased that we have with us Executive Counselor Chris Pappas, fourth-generation owner and operator of the fabulous Puritan restaurant here in Manchester, where everybody likes to go, not just in Manchester, but around the state. And he's had a distinguished career as an office holder, now holding his third term, as I mentioned, as executive counselor. And he's decided to go for federal office because we have no presidential election, we have no senatorial elections this year, but we do have congressional elections in both congressional districts. The one that's increasingly, by far the most interesting, is the 1st congressional district, where we have, I now believe, 8 announced candidates, including Chris Pappas, and I believe 3 Republican candidates. Is that right?
That's right.
And the most recent person to enter the fray is Senator Sanders' son, Levy Sanders, who lives in Claremont, which is not in the 1st district. And I don't know about that.
And Bob, while we're talking about it, I think we should say that any candidate who wants to come on, any Democratic candidate, we would be more than
That's
happy
what
to
we're
have
here
them
for.
on.
We're not going to be
We've
selecting.
had Mark McKenzie on the show.
We've had Mark
We
McKenzie
have
on the
Chris.
show, and we would be happy to do that. I'll say right out here, though, that I'm a Chris Pappas supporter. Not that anybody cares, but I do want to say that. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is the big issue of immigration, and the improbable event that Donald Trump did become president of the United States. Somehow it happened. I still can't believe it. But he started his campaign by railing against immigrations and immigrants. And I just wonder what your position would be on that, not only immigration, but the great, beautiful wall between us and Mexico. It's a little tougher to build a wall with Canada, wouldn't it? That's a long border.
I think the Canadians are building the wall. I think they're fed up with us.
In any event, you wanted to give us your thoughts on the immigration policy we should be adopting in this country?
It's the rhetoric around immigration has been really distressing for me. And when I think of the defining words on immigration, they're found on the base of the Statue of Liberty.
Right.
They're not found in Donald Trump's Twitter feed. So I think here's another example where America is not being represented in terms of our core values by this president. So I think we need a system of immigration that encourages the best and the brightest from around the world to come here and to be a part of this great experiment. I think we need to look for ways to help out with the rest of the world in terms of accepting and at integrating refugee populations
Which we know
into
how
our
to do.
communities.
We've done
and
it.
we're doing it right here in
We
Manchester.
do it right here
You know,
in
I-
Manchester. This is a city full of immigrant communities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we see them in our daily lives. They're part of our community, and they add a richness and a depth to the city of Manchester that I think is really great. We have a number of Syrian refugees that are working at my restaurant, and they're American teenagers now, and they're speaking English really well. They're enjoying playing soccer and having friends in high school, and they're doing great. And to think that they could be living along the Jordanian border, or they could be on some dangerous trek through Europe, I'm glad
Yeah.
that they're here. And I think we should welcome and embrace these people as much
I
as
think
we
we
can.
need these people.
And you know what? The bottom line is we shouldn't be using immigrants. We shouldn't be using the dreamers as a political pawn in the political
Right.
debate that's happening
Right.
in Washington right now.
I don't
And so we
understand.
need to settle the DACA issue and make sure that
I
those
just-
individuals who know no other country than the United States can be a permanent part of this
Yeah,
country.
I just
in its
don't
future.
understand that one at all. But we have a call.
We do. We got John on the
Hi,
line.
John. Welcome to the Progress Report. Glad you're joining us. Go right ahead.
Go ahead, John. You're live on the air.
John?
Oh, looks like we lost the caller.
All right.
John, please call back. We have some time. We can take your call. We sometimes want to finish our thought before we get to our calls, but we will try and get back to you if you want to come back to us.
Yeah, Manchester's a city of immigrants, right?
It certainly
the
is.
city was built on the backs of immigrant labor.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
Whether it was
the Greeks, the Irish, the
Canadian
Poles,
mill girl,
the French
or-
Canadians, sure.
Yeah.
So
and
there's a rich
those
history
and those
here.
all of those communities are able to contribute and integrate fully within the fabric of the city of Manchester,
Yeah.
and yet
Yeah.
maintain the kind of identity that keeps their communities vibrant. And that makes them recognizable to the new immigrants
Yeah.
that come in. So
Yeah.
I just think the way Manchester in its history has handled its immigrants, it hasn't been easy.
Yeah.
You go read some of those old newspapers. We have a lot of fun in the Hibernians reading old newspaper articles about how the Irish were treated. It was rough,
Oh,
but they stuck around.
They
And,
had a really bad time. At one point, there was a real riot going against the Irish immigrants here.
more than one time, but yes,
A
that's
guy named McDonough, wasn't he? We have a school name for him, wasn't he? He faced them down. And
I think you're talking you're talking the event where the mob was going to burn down St. Anne's Church.
St. Anne's Church.
And the owner, I should remember this hero's name, stood in front of the crowd with his hand behind his back and told them to go home because he employed most of them. And everyone wonders what he had behind his back and what he was going to do.
His name was McDonough. We have a McDonough School, I think, named for this guy. I think I'm right about that, which is
It's
a
certainly
really good thing.
certainly the immigrant experience is a difficult one, just by definition.
Yeah.
And they really don't get a lot of breaks until the community finally comes into its own, and we've had wave after wave after wave of that. And the immigrants we're seeing now, this wave is just a little bit different than the last one, but they're going to contribute just as much.
Yeah.
And are doing it right.
And look, I spend a lot of time stopping at small businesses, talking to them about what their concerns are. You know, you hear not too much about taxes and regulation. You hear mostly about workforce issues and where am I going to find the next workers that I need to fill certain positions.
You know, that's a really important point, because what the federal government has been doing, or at least the Republicans have been doing, is saying the way to grow business is to give them tax cuts. And you make the point, businessmen don't ask for tax cuts. They ask for workforce training. They ask for a railroad so that people can come up from the suburbs of Boston with the kind of skills they need for their high-tech business here in the mill yard. You know, that's the stuff that we need to do.
Yeah, we're the second oldest state in the country. We lose 60% of our high school graduates to institutions of higher education in other states. So we have a great export here in New Hampshire, highly educated high school graduates that are going other places. So we need to make sure we're drawing people in to be a part of the economy and part of the workforce here in New Hampshire. I think we can do a better job at attracting young people to be a part of this state, at making sure higher education is more affordable, creating pipelines between our community colleges and universities and small business. And I think a legal system of immigration that works is one aspect that could help New Hampshire thrive more economically and make sure we have a strong workforce.
So another thing I'd like to ask you about, and this is in my wheelhouse, as you'll soon see, our energy future here in New Hampshire. That's always in the news. It has been since, I was dealing with the Seabrook plant a long time ago, and it's still a huge issue. And we have an opportunity here, I think, to up our game in both renewable energy and increasing our investment in energy efficiency. And it's just distressing to me how much pushback we're getting on these things now. What do you think we should do? And, here in Manchester, we've got a project that we really should be getting behind to, use that landfill out on Dunbarton Road for our own renewable energy resource here. Could be the biggest thing in the state.
Yeah, I fought for renewable energy projects throughout my time on the Executive Council, including a large solar array here at the landfill. It was scrapped by the Republican majority on the Executive Council at the time, but we were able to get a number of others done around the state of New Hampshire with those renewable energy grants, which are really important, and that's helping us not just take tons of carbon out of the air, but it's giving communities and businesses a path forward to be able to realize some savings and be a part of a clean energy future. It's also helped us build out a number of jobs in the solar industry in particular
local installation
in New Hampshire.
Jobs,
yeah,
right?
And so we have hundreds of jobs in solar as a result of those investments facilitated by public dollars. So I think there's a lot of exciting stuff happening at the local and state level.
Sure is.
We've seen a reversal, though, at the federal level in terms of where we should be. The U.S. is no longer a leader. We've been pulled back from the world stage because this president has pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and he's doing a number of other dangerous things on environmental and climate issues.
Yeah.
And I, for one, don't believe we should wait till Al Gore makes a third movie for us to get serious about addressing climate change.
Yeah.
And what we shouldn't be doing is, drilling off the shores of New Hampshire. We should be looking for ways to invest in renewables and ensure that those technologies are being made right here in the U.S.
Some offshore wind turbines would be nice.
Yes, and that's an exciting opportunity.
It's
I
a
think,
really
that we
exciting
should
wind
investigate.
resource in the Gulf of Maine is huge. And once again, the Puritan has kind of led the way. You've got your solar panels right up on the building.
We've got them. Dial's still turning every day, so they're doing pretty well.
Nobody's sending you a bill for that sunlight you're using.
No, it powers the fryolators, so it works out for us.
So that's what
helps.
makes the chicken tenders taste so good. That's the solar power.
Have you ever tasted a chicken tender from the Puritan?
I have. I actually have.
Who has not? Who has not? One of the things that I think is most concerning to us as we see what the Trump administration is proposing in Congress is we have to protect our safety net. Don't you agree? We have to protect. You mentioned, and it's all too true, and I'm an exemplar, unfortunately. Our population is definitely aging. So many of our people are critically dependent upon the retirement that we can trace back to FDR and the New Deal, Social Security, and that seems to be under real threat from this crowd, not just the Trump administration, but a lot of the Republicans in Congress. I assume this is a softball, but there you go. You'd be against rolling those protections back?
Absolutely. I think these are fundamental bedrock programs. These aren't entitlements. These are earned benefits that people accrue over a period of time of working, being part of the economy. And
That's why we're entitled to them, because we put the money in, right?
and it's the least we can do to ensure that they're there for the next generation. So I think that it's an important part of who we are as Americans to make sure we take care of those who are of retirement age or have retired or are elderly or infirm. And I would absolutely go to the mat to support those programs.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about the race. With the number of people in, maybe you can win this with 1,000 votes. No, I'm kind of kidding.
I think you'll have more than 1,000 votes.
I think,
even
I
if
believe
that's all it
believe
is.
that's for sure. But how are you approaching this race?
Yeah.
How are you going to distinguish yourself from all these other folks that are out there,
Yeah.
including some Seacoast women,
Sure.
including former county attorney from Stratford County, and I'm leaving a lot of people out, obviously. But how are you gonna cut through to make sure that Pappas is the choice for people not only here in Manchester, which I would certainly hope they would be, but throughout the first district?
Yeah. No, I'm someone who has progressive values and a record of getting things done. And I don't think that anyone else can point to a track record like the one that I have from my years in public service. So, we're going to go out there and make that case about the issues that I've worked on, about the things I've done at the community level right here in Manchester. And I feel good about our ability to build a broad-based coalition. I think that a number of other candidates can speak to a certain group or a certain part of the state. I think we have the ability to talk to a broad spectrum of voters, independents, Democrats, Republicans, to try to build the kind of coalition we need to win. Right now I represent a third of the congressional district in my executive council seat. I've won some tough races in that part of the state, in
Yes,
a
you
district
have.
that voted for Trump and Romney and lots of other Republicans.
Yeah.
And I do it not by, shrinking from who I am or what I believe in, but by focusing on where we can get things done and how we can make people's lives better. So that's where my focus will be in this race. And if I happen to get elected, I'm going to be working hard to earn each and every vote. No one's going to outwork me in this campaign. And if you don't see a lot of me in Manchester, it's because I'm on the Seacoast or I'm in the Lakes region or up north. We're really going to be moving around a lot to have a conversation and build the support we need.
Oh, that's terrific. I think we're very fortunate that we have people like you that are interested in participating in public service. There's a lot of cynicism about it, but it's wonderful to have people like you that want to participate. We're about to wrap up, but you told me you had something you
Well,
wanted to
if I could just take a minute, I have an announcement to make, Bob.
Oh, my.
I don't know if you've heard this, but I'll try to be as quick as I can. If we're going to elect good people like Chris Pappas or any one of the great Democratic candidates that are running in the first district, we're going to need here in Manchester to have a unified Democratic Party pulling together. And there's been it's been difficult to pull the party together after the last presidential campaign. People are working really hard at that. But in the interest of that, in the interest of trying to find the kind of common ground, common purpose that the Democratic Party here in Manchester needs, I've decided to run for chairman.
Oh, yes. I heard about that.
Our city committee chairman has become the chief of staff for Mayor Craig and has stepped down. And we're going to have an election on the 15th of March. On the evening of the 15th. The state party hasn't decided exactly where that election is going to take place yet, but as soon as we know, we're going to try to get the word out. And I'm running to try to bring Democrats in Manchester together so we can all pull on the oar the same direction and try to get some good Democrats elected. And I'm hoping that folks watching who might be Democrats might be able to come out to that election and support me.
I certainly hope they will.
And
'Cause,
I'll be working hard on
I
that.
think
then, too.
you've earned the opportunity to serve, and I'm glad that you want to do it, because this is not a job that sometimes, you have to beg people to do this, but
My wife thinks I'm crazy, but I'm going to do it anyway.
anyway.
You know what? We all have to be a little crazy these days and push ourselves beyond what we think we're comfortable doing, because it's important that we're all in the arena. And I think it's great that you're willing to step forward. And we all need to work on making this state and this country better.
Thanks for
appreciate
coming,
that.
Chris. I'll be
Thank
back next week with Lou D'Alessandro. Progress report next week, first program in March. Tune in. Thanks, folks.
Thanks for watching, folks.